SleepLIVE.
The last impression is sometimes the most important. The final frame, final note, or final word is one that echoes with you when you finish any piece of media, and there are plenty of them people look back on with fondness, sorrow, and even anger. Hell, you probably can name dozens of endings from stories that have greatly impacted you too. I want to focus on endings from games that have made you rethink entire playthroughs and change how you view stuff from earlier in the story. Was it something like a reveal that completely recontextualizes a character's actions up to that point, such as in the game Nier, or was it the ending of a long-standing series that completely killed all momentum in future revisits for a lot of people, like with what happened in Mass Effect 3? For me at least, I have an ending from a game that has had an immense visual influence on my channel, with it being the main inspiration for the representation of me you see before you. That game being the 2017 indie masterpiece Night in the Woods. The ending of this game is one I often seen misinterpreted and misunderstood from people online, with them seemingly missing what the game was going for with its final act, and often citing it as being out of place and unfocused compared to the rest of the game, among other critiques. Today I want to throw my hat into the ring when it comes to the discourse around this ending, and hopefully open up a lot of eyes to some of the genius done in this final act. So sit back, relax, and please join me as we delve deep into what I find to be one of gaming's most misunderstood and underappreciated endings. Enjoy! Before we get into the main subject of this video, let me give you some context. Night in the Woods follows our protagonist May Borowski, a 20-year-old college dropout who has returned to the small town of Possum Springs suddenly after dropping out of college seemingly out of nowhere. May journeys through her small hometown and things have drastically changed, with old locations being overhauled or long abandoned, while new ones are ever present. It's a pretty relatable bit of character perspective a lot of people can attach themselves to. Like, we all have visited a place long from our childhood like an old house or neighborhood and felt the warmth of nostalgia blended in with this weird surreal wind of change at some point in our life. The game does an excellent job of having this relatability with May's inner dialogue too, as she often will give context and further background in terms of her previous interactions with these places. This works as a fantastic way of developing her as a character more, and letting the player get a grasp for what kind of person she is. This sometimes is used in even the most brutal and or cringy of ways, with us seeing some honesty that the average person probably shouldn't share at that very moment. In a way, we're kind of getting in the head of the character. Contextually, this also does a fantastic job of letting us get perspective from the average person living in this town and making it a far stronger, more believable setting. Which it should be, since these kinds of towns are super common all over the world, most notably in the Midwestern United States. I'd say the game's main grip on the player comes from May's relationship with the characters that inhabit this town though, as the game is this mesh between something like Life is Strange, but good, with something more in line with social sims such as the Persona or Animal Crossing series. In fact, there's a fair bit this game shares with specifically Persona 4. Both focusing on narratives surrounding individuals exploring and building relationships as they uncover a great mystery. Hell, both even have mythological gods involved in what are initially relatively small-scale conflicts, but we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves here. Night in the Woods has paths and days where you can explore and choose between hanging between multiple different people, like say your older lifelong friends, mom, or even new people as you gain a grasp for the kinds of lives these people have lived and wish to change or pursue going into the future. You have the depressed, responsibility-driven Bee dealing with the awful hand she was dealt following the passing of her mother, leaving her to give up any educational pursuits in exchange for financial stability so she can help her emotionally destroyed shell of a dad run their local business. All while being burdened with an old ex-friend like May who gave up what would be a dream life for Bee, seemingly with no reason. Her dynamic with May is probably one of my favorites, as she's this person forced into these more adult responsibilities who brings a lot of perspective to May, whom often acts childish and stuck in the past. I'd say this is best showcased in the scene where the two are in this awkward car ride home from a the party after May goes in this drunk, nihilistic, self-destructive rant towards a dude she went on some shitty prom date with back in high school. Here we really see the dynamic play out in its full glory, with May drunkenly reminiscing on her childhood in rose-tinted glasses, as B kind of hits her with a cold, harsh reality of their current day life, leading to a point where May insensitively forgets about the death of B's own mom, and spiraling the conversation into B venting about how disappointed she is in May. This scene genuinely hurts to watch, as you see this friend all washed up, drunk, and once again stuck in the past, conflicting with B's own frustrations towards her not living up to her potential showcase in the past. I, and a fair bit of the older folks watching this, can probably relate to being in a similar position at some point in our lives. Taking care of someone you once looked up to as they pathetically fall into awful cycles and actions that only hurt themselves and the ones around them long term. Some people may give up on old friends and peers like this pretty quickly, but there's also others who stick around and hope to guide those so obviously hurt and misguided in the right path. That's where an interesting dynamic with two other characters comes in and makes May face the same issue, but in completely different ways. Her dynamic with Gregg and Angus is one where she has a friend in Gregg, completely fading into a lot of her more toxic, stuck in the past habits as they get up to irresponsible, spur-of-the-moment hangout sessions, resulting in them reminiscing on the past in often childish ways. This doesn't come without its own introspection from May though, as all these actions are impacting Gregg's relationship with his boyfriend Angus, who serves as his anchor to keep Gregg on track. They as a couple have these ambitions for something much more in a completely different town, hoping to grow away from the past and live better lives. Now they have a situation where one of them is kind of getting caught up with an old irresponsible friend, taking one of them to the past and taking that focus away from the ambitions the two have so desperately been wanting to pursue. May doesn't really understand this angle or drive that Gregg has with Angus to leave the town of Possum Springs for a much more positive environment. She's once again way too stuck in the past and willing to unintentionally harm the relationship of an ambitious, healthy couple, and making Angus the victim of a refusal to move on. This boils to a point where May third wheels a couple of arguments with the two as Gregg defends the irresponsibility of his and May's actions, slowly putting this shy, quiet bear dude into a situation where he's extremely frustrated and feeling as if all the work he and Gregg have put in is being thrown away. This showcases a complete opposite response to B, where in this relationship, the friend Gregg in this case is encouraging and reminding her of this harmful stuck in the past mindset and will to unknowingly throw away a life he's been building towards and present it in the most warm, nostalgic way possible. With how I've laid this out, you may look at May as a bit of a flawed person. She's pretty selfish, childish, genuinely harmful to her friends, and pretty blatantly avoiding some sort of problem. A problem that looms over her constant interactions with her mom, questioning what caused her to throw her life away, and these vague nightmares subconsciously implying a much greater problem. A problem she can no longer run away from when she's faced head-on with the narrative-shifting events of Harfest Night, the beginning of the most divisive and misunderstood narrative arc in this game. Harfest starts as what should be a relatively lighthearted night for May, a celebration very much riffing off some local version of Halloween with a parade, plays for watered-down versions of urban legends for kids, and people dressing up in fun costumes. I actually really love the cute little wizard costume May wears this night, in tribute to some doom metal band. I don't know, it's adorable and a fun little one-time design. Back on topic though, this night goes pretty damn south as May, after spending all night doing fun little activities, witnesses a kidnapping. Like straight up someone being kidnapped in the middle of the town. After chasing what she assumes to be a ghost to the end of the town, she loses track of the kidnapper, absolutely shaken and traumatized by what she saw. I mean, a kidnapping ghost in the town she once knew so well? Things really have changed. May the next day immediately gathers her crew of friends together, once again pulling them into what could be a very harmful situation. After a lot of back and forth in terms of schedule, May and the crew decide to go to various different locations individually with her in hopes of finding more information as to what could have happened that night. Little does May know, these individual hangouts bring a lot of perspective that shifts her mindset up to this point in the game. Starting with B, May investigates the library while basically being looked after as if she's some sort of child, not really treating it very seriously since she was the friend most vocally critical towards what May saw that night. This hangout, along with her investigation of the graveyard, only really gives some backstory to the kind of person B is, with her grieving her mom's grave and opening up a bit more when they're forced to give a secret to progress their investigation by some teens. But it opens B up to the possibility of trying again with May at a party spot she would often go to as some sort of escapism from the mundane and dreary life she was working at the old pickaxe with her dad. May utterly fucks this up for her pretty bad though, as she in typical fashion ignorantly reveals that B isn't a local to the people of the party, utterly shattering the illusion that she was a lot like these college kids B so desperately desired to live in the shoes of. B runs off and in a very mature move, May chases after her, eventually having a bit of an argument and vent session about how she doesn't need to have this sort of unhealthy escapism. While hypocritical, it causes a bit of a self-realization of the damage and harm she's been inflicting on B throughout the entire game in her own attempts at escaping, and it serves as an excellent moment of growth for both characters. This is similarly repeated with her events with Gregg and Angus. May and Gregg go about their typical antics exploring various areas and stabbing each other because, hey, I guess that's what friends do, I guess. But stuff develops on this particular trip that shows a bit of maturity and a side of Gregg May isn't particularly familiar with. The two adventuring deep into these woods feels like a metaphorical unveiling of the mind of Gregg, with it starting in a typical spur-of-the-moment ride full of warm colors and nostalgic scents that remind you of a time long forgotten and escape from the responsibility of work, to the chaotic aforementioned knife fight, to a talk by the lake where Gregg reflects on himself and delves into the frustrations and worries about himself in the relationship. Gregg talks almost as if he's feeling guilt about not doing enough for the two, and expressing anger towards Angus's family life, which may get some genuinely depressing elaboration on when going on the slow and calm hike at Possum Jump Bark. These two events really help us get an understanding for the way the couple looks at themselves and the world. The event where you go with the two on a trip to a donut shop uses all this up to really develop all the characters involved in fantastic ways. It starts off as an event where Gregg and May fixate on this really creepy animatronic they kind of force onto Angus, later dragging him to a pancake restaurant while he's visibly very irritated with the two. On the way, the wheel on the car goes flat, and this is sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back for Angus, leading to a huge freakout on the two about the amount of pure irresponsibility the two have been on, and how it's genuinely been an awful influence on the push forward the two have worked towards. May at first is a bit unresponsive to the frustration from Angus, but after a bit of talking and letting it out in a random bathroom, she's able to finally understand the perspective and maturely puts these actions she's encouraged within Gregg to rest, with the group metaphorically and literally leaving them behind in the woods with that animatronic that Gregg and May had stinky up the couple's apartment. I genuinely love how these two routes tackle the theme of immaturity and the failure to move on from the past in different ways. B has her aspects of being forced to face the unknown ahead in the future that conflicts with the immaturity of May, and after directly harming B, she's able to have that introspection to look within herself and learn to move forward for not just the sake of herself, but others. All while Angus and Gregg represent two coexisting sides of accepting the past and moving on that push each other to become better people and make each other happy. My point being, if you haven't gotten it by now, this game is about accepting change and progress and the many ways people struggle with this. Throughout the game, we're basically watching our protagonist grow out of this toxic mindset and become a better, more optimistic person, looking forward to the future rather than looking away and over-relying on the town and world she once knew. It's a perfect wrap-up point to our characters and serves its purpose in delivering a game based around engaging with these two narratives as they grow. So the big problem people have with this game is, why the hell does it randomly at the end become a story about this gang of depressed animals in their mid-20s taking on a Lovecraftian god and cult right at the end? Let me tell you why this ending is so amazing and, thematically and narratively, progresses our characters even further despite the fact it feels so out of nowhere and weird. For context, this reveal and ending arc happens after the gang has investigated nearly all the different locations where there may have been ghost sightings or things that could possibly connect to this ghost theory of May's. This leaves her frustrated and feeling somewhat defeated, with her gut just telling her that what she saw had to be some sort of supernatural, bigger thing. On top of that, she's having these weird consistent migraines and dreams that allude to some weird presence watching her. And with her feeling as if her friends are taking this seriously, often writing this off as some sort of stress response from the recent change in her life, she decides to make one last trip into the woods in hopes of finding anything to hopefully not make her come off as crazy. In a twist of fate, the group stumbles upon a cult meeting by an old abandoned mine in the middle of killing a fellow member of theirs. Thanks to him leaving a severed arm in the middle of town, the main cast just happened to stumble upon pretty early into the game. This causes the group to make a run for it, leading to May tripping on a rock and falling down a hole. The game then presents these next events in a very artistic way, cutting between times and perspectives and kind of confusing the viewer on this cliffhanger moment as May explores this afterlife-esque vision while her friends are paranoid and boarded up inside Gregg and Angus's apartment, fearing an eventual attack from the cult. May is lost in this white void, blasting funeral-style old church organs, reminiscing parts of Possum Springs, and goes through these visions of being recovered and gathered around by her family and close neighbors as they worry about her health. She's very quiet and holding herself as if she's looking for comfort in this dreary white vision of the world. It's like her own view of the world is fading into the unknown light and slowly eating up everything she loves. She eventually gets up from her room and walks into the unknown, as if facing what's ahead. We cut back to our group getting a knock on the door and they're mortified, fearing the unknown horrors that may lay with the cult. Luckily though, it's just a very out of it May. Again, she's not very vocal and is almost going through some sort of dissociative anxiety attack. She tries to eat but really struggles and immediately asks the group if she could go to sleep. There's a lot of perspective switching, really adding all this tension and uncertainty in this moment, and it really adds up to one of my favorite exchanges of dialogue between May and either Gregg or B. Either way, as nearly all sound cuts, she vents to the two about the mental struggles she faced in college, really not feeling a sense of belonging or comfort in her environment, having these episodes where this would get really bad and make the world into almost this minimalist blur. Talking about the statue in particular of someone pointing at her, freaking her out, and making her into the shut-in for days, until she threw away her college life and went to her home in Possum Springs. This actually has been a thing that she struggled with her entire life, resulting in a famous freakout that earned her the name Killer after randomly beating the shit out of a random kid during one of these episodes. Her friends are really empathetic to her struggles and really start to understand some of the perspective from May here. It wasn't just a fear of maturing or giving up to her, but rather an unchecked mental health crisis slowly unfolding and crippling her grip to life. This is something similar to a dissociative disorder, if you will. She elaborates on how she got to the place she is now, feeling like these episodes are connected to this cult in some strange cosmic way, with this feeling of the world or woods constantly watching her and messing with her dreams in this weird way, specifically mentioning an interaction she had with this godly figure in her dream, in which she denies a nihilistic, non-important look at humanity, for one where the little things matter, and looking at nihilism and that kind of mindset as being a bit of a douchey mindset in general. We'll talk a bit more about this god in particular later, but for now this conversation has motivated May, and she waits until everyone knocks out and feels the drive to take on this cult alone. The group catches on to this super quickly though, and forces her to go with them deeper into the rabbit hole they've all been forcefully tangled into. On the way they shoot a guy blocking the path and run after him deep into some old mines. May comments that this strong, unsettling feeling is getting stronger, one she's felt before and almost to an extent her entire life. The group eventually finds themselves faced with a dark, deep hole in the sight of many cult members armed and prepared for the worst. They take this moment to de-escalate the group and tell them what they do and why they do it. The cult is chthonic in nature, devoting themselves to the Lovecraftian god Shub-Niggurath, the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young, a god who is often compared to the story The Great God Pan, written by Arthur McCann, a figure representing nature itself. And not just nature itself, but the feeling of walking in an empty field and feeling the weight of everything around you putting pressure on the mind. Fun fact actually, this is actually the origin of the word panic, which is something May very much expressed feeling earlier in her moments of disassociation. Lovecraft's interpretation of this is one of disgust for life entirely. A god who looks at life and death both equally as alien and evil, an embodiment almost of detached nihilistic philosophy, a god who feeds on death within the never-ending cycle, a perfect antagonist or a hero who has found value in growth and moving forward from the cycle. The cult very much backs up the mindset of the god here with their actions, revealing them noticing a cycle the town was stuck in that was leading them to economic ruin and threatening to turn this once thriving miner town into a struggling ghost of the past. The cult felt the fear of losing everything they knew and cared so much within this town, and the answer to their worries came one day when a miner while digging in this cave fell into a hole. a hole in the center of everything. This hole would call through singing to members of the town over the many decades, asking for a sacrifice to feed and keep the town secure for another period of time, often feeding those whom they didn't feel had much contribution to society or their own philosophy of what the future should be. May has heard the song throughout her entire journey, hell, even her entire life. The dreams, the disassociation, it was the god calling out to her to continue the cycle. May mentally falls into the hole here, faced with the reds and blues as this droning growl almost consumes all the atmosphere. The god is calling onto her and giving her a chance to give into the cycle it so desperately wants her to feed into. The cult, confident in her giving in, lets her and her friends go, hoping for that eventual yes that preserves the status quo. The god tempting her one last time on her way out, but she finally refuses. She wants to be angry, she wants to hurt, she wants all of life to fucking hit her. She wants it to hurt and only leave her with drive and hope. She finally has that motivation to break the cycle and become that person that means something, not a desperate shell clinging on to what once was. Not this cult, not Killer, the teenager from Possum Springs. May Borowski, the one who's either gonna die here faced against this god or go on to become a changed person. The god finally lets her go, and May's fucking pumped to drop this remnant of the past. But a cult member still angry of getting shot on the way here, a representation of that mindset, grabs onto her leg. She pushes back, kicking furiously as the man gets crushed under the elevator, a representation of the weight of the future. This causes a cave-in that seals the future of this town as May and her friends rise into the blue light of the well, basking in the blue light of the morning. The future. Now May has a life ahead of her full of promises of change. Happy change. The motivation to find a home in the world outside of her hometown with Gregg and Angus. The motivation to push on and explore the unknown and try to fix what's out there on a road trip with B. The motivation to finally move on. This ending is so misunderstood in my eyes for how well it finally buries that lingering thought of the past, both literally and figuratively, while also leaving plenty of open-ended questions for the future. Entire replays of this game kind of have this cool aspect of mystery, mostly in that last day, that kind of makes you question certain NPCs you wouldn't really think about twice. What people who weren't around in town are actually dead deep within those minds and were contributing to the harmful mindset of those cult members stuck in the past. Either way, Mayna has moved on with conviction and confidence for what's to come. And the game fantastically tackles that last hurdle behind people's drive for motivation or progress. The pure conviction, the maturity to accept the flaws and failings of the past, and push through all this to become and hope for better in the future is one I felt like many misunderstood under this intertwining story of cults, gods, and depressed cats in small mining towns. The act that pushes for metaphorical and philosophical questioning that asks you, much like May, to push through today for a better tomorrow. This mindset that the end of the game is pushing is one that I revisit nearly every year around autumn to winter time. A game that comforts you with colors, characters, and sounds that feed into your need for comfort from the past, shows the flaws of doing so too much, and pushes for overcoming that last hurdle from you at the end. The motivation and amount this ending and overall game has spoken to me is one that I can't really put value on. It's one that has gotten me out of depression from homelessness and the abandonment of oneself from an entire chunk of my family. A piece of art that really helped me give myself value when I was told I was worthless by ones I hoped to guide me on the right path. A game that helped me never give up on my dreams and hopes for the future and pushed me to pull the trigger on stuff like making a YouTube channel, the push to make videos like the ones you're watching now that hopefully will help others and leave that impact on not just the world, but my own happiness. A push that has only gone stronger with all the support and stories many have expressed in recent videos. The way you guys have affected me with words about your tears and coldness of the past has only pushed me to do more going forward to light the path forward for others who've gone through similar things to me. Thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity of a lifetime with your continued support. And thanks again so much for the likes, comments, subscriptions, and donations. And thank you all for listening to me talk about why I find this ending to be so misunderstood. Thanks again, and I hope to see you guys next time. See ya!